The Galactic Council's grand chamber echoed with murmurs as the representatives of various species gathered, their holographic projections shimmering in the dim blue light. At the center stood General Karish of the Kroth Dominion, his crimson-scaled body towering over the smaller species in the room. His golden eyes burned with confidence as he addressed the council. "The humans are weak," he declared, his voice filled with contempt. "They have no true planetary defenses, no interstellar fleet, and no significant allies. Conquering Earth will be effortless." His words sent ripples through the assembly. Some nodded in agreement, seeing humanity as an insignificant primitive species, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Not all were convinced. A few of the more experienced council members had studied humanity closely. They had seen reports of their unpredictable nature, their history of war, and their ability to defy expectations. But the Kroth were blinded by their past victories. They had subjugated hundreds of planets with brute force, and in their arrogance, they saw no reason why Earth would be any different. The Council's warnings fell on deaf ears as the Kroth warships departed, heading straight for the small blue planet they believed would soon be theirs. As the Kroth fleet approached Earth, their massive ships cast shadows over the planet's surface. Their sensors detected no energy barriers, no orbital defense platforms, nothing that signaled a prepared military force. It was laughable. The humans hadn't even hidden their cities underground like most prey species did when they knew invasion was inevitable. Karish smirked as his fleet descended. This would be nothing more than a demonstration of superior firepower. He ordered his ships to spread out, confident that his forces could crush any resistance with ease. The first wave began their assault, unleashing precise energy blasts upon key military installations, expecting Earth's forces to crumble within hours. But something was wrong. Their weapons met interference, their targeting systems began to glitch, and their data streams were flooded with strange signals. Before they could react, Earth's defenses came to life in a way no one had anticipated. Jets and missiles launched from hidden bases, cyber warfare scrambled the Kroth's communications, and ground-based artillery fired with terrifying accuracy. Humanity had not been caught off guard. They had been waiting. The first major shock came when an entire Kroth battleship, one of the most advanced in their fleet, was torn apart mid-air by a weapon they had never seen before. It wasn't plasma or conventional missiles, but something else. Something designed specifically to counter their technology. Karish watched in disbelief as the wreckage fell to the surface, a grim reminder that this battle would not be as easy as they had imagined. On the ground, human soldiers fought with a level of resilience that defied logic. The Kroth had expected them to break, to surrender like so many others had in the past, but instead, they fought with terrifying intensity. Civilians didn't flee in blind panic. They organized, adapted, and resisted in ways that no other species had ever dared. Even in occupied zones, the humans waged guerrilla warfare, setting traps, disrupting supply lines, and ambushing patrols. The Kroth had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but it was becoming clear that numbers alone would not win this war. As days passed, the Kroth's frustration grew into fear. Their soldiers reported strange anomalies, machines behaving unpredictably, messages intercepted and altered before reaching command, and weapons malfunctioning at crucial moments. It was as if the humans had anticipated their every move. Their battle strategy, which had conquered countless worlds, was now crumbling before their eyes. Karish, once filled with overconfidence, now felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping into his mind: doubt. He had studied human history but dismissed much of it as exaggerated myths. But now, as his forces suffered devastating losses, he realized the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology, but their minds. They thought differently from any species he had encountered. They were not just reacting. They were adapting at a speed that defied logic. Every time the Kroth adjusted their tactics, the humans had already found a counter before the change was even executed. It was unnatural, terrifying. And it was working. One night, an emergency transmission reached the command center of the Kroth fleet. Their main supply vessel had been seized, not by an overwhelming military force, but by a group of human operatives using nothing but stolen alien weapons and modified human gear. A single team had managed to take control of an entire warship, using tactics so unorthodox that even the best Kroth strategists couldn't predict them. Karish stared at the reports in stunned silence. This wasn't just resistance, it was systematic dismantling. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were learning. And worst of all, they were getting better with each battle. His fleet, once so sure of victory, was now fragmented and on the defensive. For the first time in his long military career, Karish understood what it meant to fear an enemy. The war should have ended by now. By all calculations, Earth should have fallen. But instead, the Kroth found themselves trapped, bleeding resources, losing soldiers, and facing an enemy that refused to surrender. The Galactic Council, once passive observers, now watched with growing horror. The same representatives who had laughed at the thought of humanity posing a threat were now silent. The Kroth, the most feared conquerors in the galaxy, were losing. They were being humiliated, outmatched not by superior technology, but by sheer human ingenuity and willpower. Karish finally saw the truth he had been too arrogant to accept. Humanity was not weak. They were the most dangerous force in the galaxy, and by attacking Earth, the Kroth had made a mistake they would never recover from. The retreat order was given, but it was too late. The humans had already crippled their forces beyond repair. As the remaining ships fled the planet's atmosphere, they carried not just their wounded and shattered pride, but also a message that would spread across the stars, a warning that no species would ever forget. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not to be conquered. They were survivors, warriors, and above all, the one species in the galaxy that should never be underestimated. The Galactic Council convened once more, but this time, there was no debate, no arrogance, only fear. The lesson had been learned too late. Earth was not a planet to invade. It was a planet to fear. The Kroth war fleet hovered in the cold void of space, their massive battleships forming an unbreakable wall of destruction as they approached Earth's orbit. From their command center, General Karish stood with his arms crossed, watching the planet below through the reinforced glass of his warship's bridge. Earth looked peaceful, its blue oceans and green lands untouched by the horrors of interstellar war. The humans had no planetary shields, no visible orbital defenses, nothing that suggested they were ready for an attack. It was almost laughable. The Kroth had conquered countless worlds, breaking entire civilizations under their boots, and yet the Galactic Council had dared to warn them about this primitive race. "This is the mighty Earth," Karish scoffed, turning to his officers. "They don't even know we are here. Begin the descent. This invasion will be over before their leaders even understand what is happening." His officers nodded, and within moments, the warships activated their engines, pushing through Earth's upper atmosphere like silent predators closing in on helpless prey. The first strike was meant to be swift and decisive. Kroth forces targeted key military installations, expecting to cripple Earth's ability to fight within hours. Plasma cannons charged, and in a synchronized attack, powerful energy blasts rained down from the sky. But as soon as the first strike was fired, something unexpected happened. Earth's skies came alive with a counterattack so precise and devastating that even the most seasoned Kroth commanders hesitated. Missiles, fired from hidden bases, erupted from the surface, tearing through the air with unnatural speed. Laser turrets emerged from concealed silos, locking onto Kroth warships with terrifying accuracy. The Kroth had expected a slow, panicked response from a primitive species. Instead, they were met with instant retaliation, as if the humans had been waiting for this exact moment. Explosions filled the sky as several Kroth fighters were obliterated within seconds, their flaming wreckage spiraling toward the ground. Confusion spread through the fleet. What is happening? Karish growled as red warning lights flashed across his warship's control panel. How are they responding this quickly? His officers scrambled for answers, but there was no logic to what they were witnessing. The humans should have been overwhelmed. Instead, they were fighting back with an efficiency that made no sense. As the invasion force continued its descent, the situation only worsened. The Kroth ground troops, heavily armored and trained for planetary warfare, expected to encounter minimal resistance once they landed. They had assumed that Earth's military would be disorganized, their soldiers panicked and easily overpowered. But the moment they touched the surface, they realized how wrong they were. Human forces were waiting for them, positioned with tactical precision that no primitive species should have been capable of. The battlefields turned into kill zones as hidden explosives detonated beneath Kroth landing crafts, sending fire and metal into the air. Snipers, using weapons far more advanced than expected, eliminated officers with deadly accuracy, disrupting command structures before the fight had even truly begun. Entire Kroth squads disappeared into ambushes, never to be heard from again. There were no open fields of war, no predictable formations. The humans fought with chaos, adapting with every second, countering every move with strategies that no algorithm could predict. In the heart of a ruined city, a Kroth commander led his soldiers through what should have been an easy occupation. The streets were eerily silent, but every shadow felt like a threat. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the windows of destroyed buildings, forcing the Kroth to take cover. Civilians, who should have been fleeing in terror, were fighting back alongside trained soldiers, using stolen alien weapons and makeshift explosives. It wasn't just a battle, it was resistance on a scale the Kroth had never faced before. Every alley, every rooftop, every corner was a potential death trap. It wasn't just Earth's military that was dangerous, it was the people. The Kroth had invaded dozens of planets, but never had they seen civilians refuse to submit, refuse to break even when faced with an overwhelming force. Fear began to creep into the minds of the invaders. This was not going to be an easy war. Back in orbit, Karish watched in growing frustration as reports flooded in. Supply lines disrupted, units wiped out, warships being systematically targeted by counterattacks. He slammed his fist against the control panel. Impossible. This was supposed to be over in hours. How are they still fighting? But deep down, he knew the answer. The Galactic Council had tried to warn him, but he had ignored them. The humans were different. They didn't fight like the other species. They didn't submit when faced with overwhelming odds. They were intelligent, resourceful, and worst of all, relentless. The Kroth had strength, but strength alone was not enough against an enemy that refused to break. Karish's confidence, once unshakable, now wavered. This was no longer an invasion. It was a mistake that could cost the Kroth everything. Then came the final, most terrifying realization. The humans were learning. The longer the battle lasted, the more efficient their attacks became. They were adapting to Kroth technology, countering their weapons, disrupting their communications. In mere hours, Earth had turned from a defenseless target into a battleground that the Kroth were struggling to control. Karish could feel it. If they did not find a way to crush this resistance soon, it would only get worse. The war had just begun, but already he could see the future, and it was not one where the Kroth stood victorious. The humans had not just survived the first encounter. They had turned it into a warning. And now, the entire galaxy would be watching. General Karish stood in the command center of his warship, his face twisted in frustration as he watched the battlefield unfold on the holographic display before him. The invasion of Earth, which was supposed to be swift and decisive, had turned into a disaster. The humans were not just surviving. They were fighting back with a ferocity and intelligence that defied all logic. Every time the Kroth forces tried to establish control over a city, their troops were ambushed. Every attempt to secure supply lines was met with sabotage. No matter how many reinforcements were sent, they never returned the same way. The humans were not giving up. They were fighting as if defeat was not an option, as if surrender was something their minds could not even comprehend. It was something Karish had never seen before. The Kroth had conquered countless worlds, reducing proud civilizations to dust. But here on Earth, they had encountered something terrifying, an enemy that refused to break. On the ground, the war had turned into a nightmare for the invaders. Kroth soldiers moved through the ruins of cities, their eyes scanning every shadow, their weapons ready to fire at the slightest movement. But fear had begun to spread among them. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap. The humans had turned their own planet into a battlefield where the invaders were never safe. Snipers hid in broken buildings, taking down Kroth officers with deadly accuracy before disappearing like ghosts. Civilians, who should have been running in fear, were fighting back, using stolen alien weapons, improvised explosives, and even their bare hands. Every alleyway, every rooftop, every darkened window was a potential ambush point. The Kroth, who had once laughed at the idea of human resistance, were now forced to admit the horrifying truth. This was not just a fight. It was a war for survival, and the humans were winning it in ways the Kroth had never encountered before. Entire battalions of elite Kroth warriors were being wiped out in the dead of night. Patrols would go out and never return. Armored vehicles were destroyed before they could even reach their targets. The humans fought with terrifying efficiency, using strategies that no war algorithm could predict. They adapted to every move the Kroth made, learning from each battle, improving their tactics in real time. Every mistake the Kroth made was used against them. They had the advantage in technology, firepower, and numbers, but none of it mattered against an enemy that refused to give up. The humans were not playing by the rules of war. They were rewriting them. Karish's frustration turned into something more dangerous. Fear. He had never feared an enemy before. The Kroth were supposed to be the strongest, the most dominant species in the galaxy. They had crushed entire empires without breaking a sweat. But now, against the humans, they were the ones being crushed. The Galactic Council had tried to warn them. There had been whispers, stories of human resilience, tales of how they had survived countless disasters, wars, and near extinctions, only to rise stronger each time. Karish had dismissed them as myths, exaggerations designed to scare weaker races. But now, as he watched his warships fall from the sky, his armies crumble under relentless counterattacks, he realized the truth. Humanity was not a race that could be conquered. They were something else entirely. The turning point came when the Kroth attempted a final push into one of Earth's major cities. Karish had poured everything into the attack, sending his most powerful warriors, his deadliest weapons, his most advanced war machines. The order was simple: crush the resistance, break their spirit, force them to surrender. But as his forces moved in, they were met with something that shattered their confidence completely. The humans didn't just fight back. They countered every move with precision, using their terrain, their knowledge, their sheer determination to tear through the invaders. Kroth war machines, impervious to most weapons, were brought down with tactics the Kroth had never seen before. Soldiers fought in perfect coordination, moving with an instinct that defied explanation. It was as if every single human, from trained military officers to civilians who had never held a weapon before, was part of the same unstoppable force. Then came the final blow. A message was broadcast across every Kroth communication channel, cutting through their encrypted signals, overriding their systems. A human general, face covered in dirt and sweat, appeared on the screen. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes that sent a chill through every Kroth who saw him. "You came here thinking you could conquer us," he said. "You thought we would break. But you don't understand what we are. We are not just a species. We are survival itself. And we will never stop fighting." The war was over before Karish could even give the order to retreat. His forces were already fleeing, abandoning their positions, scrambling to escape a battlefield that had turned into their grave. The mighty Kroth war machine, undefeated in countless conquests, had been brought to its knees by a race they had underestimated. And as the last Kroth ships left Earth's orbit, Karish knew the truth. The humans had won. Not just this battle, but something far greater. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. Humanity was not just another civilization. They were something far more dangerous, something unbreakable. General Karish stood in the command center of his warship, his face twisted in frustration as he watched the battlefield unfold on the holographic display before him. The invasion of Earth, which was supposed to be swift and decisive, had turned into a disaster. The humans were not just surviving. They were fighting back with a ferocity and intelligence that defied all logic. Every time the Kroth forces tried to establish control over a city, their troops were ambushed. Every attempt to secure supply lines was met with sabotage. No matter how many reinforcements were sent, they never returned the same way. The humans were not giving up. They were fighting as if defeat was not an option, as if surrender was something their minds could not even comprehend. It was something Karish had never seen before. The Kroth had conquered countless worlds, reducing proud civilizations to dust. But here on Earth, they had encountered something terrifying, an enemy that refused to break. On the ground, the war had turned into a nightmare for the invaders. Kroth soldiers moved through the ruins of cities, their eyes scanning every shadow, their weapons ready to fire at the slightest movement. But fear had begun to spread among them. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap. The humans had turned their own planet into a battlefield where the invaders were never safe. Snipers hid in broken buildings, taking down Kroth officers with deadly accuracy before disappearing like ghosts. Civilians, who should have been running in fear, were fighting back, using stolen alien weapons, improvised explosives, and even their bare hands. Every alleyway, every rooftop, every darkened window was a potential ambush point. The Kroth, who had once laughed at the idea of human resistance, were now forced to admit the horrifying truth. This was not just a fight. It was a war for survival, and the humans were winning it in ways the Kroth had never encountered before. Entire battalions of elite Kroth warriors were being wiped out in the dead of night. Patrols would go out and never return. Armored vehicles were destroyed before they could even reach their targets. The humans fought with terrifying efficiency, using strategies that no war algorithm could predict. They adapted to every move the Kroth made, learning from each battle, improving their tactics in real time. Every mistake the Kroth made was used against them. They had the advantage in technology, firepower, and numbers, but none of it mattered against an enemy that refused to give up. The humans were not playing by the rules of war. They were rewriting them. Karish's frustration turned into something more dangerous. Fear. He had never feared an enemy before. The Kroth were supposed to be the strongest, the most dominant species in the galaxy. They had crushed entire empires without breaking a sweat. But now, against the humans, they were the ones being crushed. The Galactic Council had tried to warn them. There had been whispers, stories of human resilience, tales of how they had survived countless disasters, wars, and near extinctions, only to rise stronger each time. Karish had dismissed them as myths, exaggerations designed to scare weaker races. But now, as he watched his warships fall from the sky, his armies crumble under relentless counterattacks, he realized the truth. Humanity was not a race that could be conquered. They were something else entirely. The turning point came when the Kroth attempted a final push into one of Earth's major cities. Karish had poured everything into the attack, sending his most powerful warriors, his deadliest weapons, his most advanced war machines. The order was simple: crush the resistance, break their spirit, force them to surrender. But as his forces moved in, they were met with something that shattered their confidence completely. The humans didn't just fight back. They countered every move with precision, using their terrain, their knowledge, their sheer determination to tear through the invaders. Kroth war machines, impervious to most weapons, were brought down with tactics the Kroth had never seen before. Soldiers fought in perfect coordination, moving with an instinct that defied explanation. It was as if every single human, from trained military officers to civilians who had never held a weapon before, was part of the same unstoppable force. Then came the final blow. A message was broadcast across every Kroth communication channel, cutting through their encrypted signals, overriding their systems. A human general, face covered in dirt and sweat, appeared on the screen. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes that sent a chill through every Kroth who saw him. "You came here thinking you could conquer us," he said. "You thought we would break, but you don't understand what we are. We are not just a species. We are survival itself, and we will never stop fighting." The war was over before Karish could even give the order to retreat. His forces were already fleeing, abandoning their positions, scrambling to escape a battlefield that had turned into their grave. The mighty Kroth war machine, undefeated in countless conquests, had been brought to its knees by a race they had underestimated. And as the last Kroth ships left Earth's orbit, Karish knew the truth. The humans had won. Not just this battle. The night sky above Earth was ablaze with streaks of fire as the Kroth warships entered the planet's atmosphere, their massive forms descending like dark harbingers of doom. General Karish stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes narrowing as he watched Earth grow larger through the reinforced glass. It was supposed to be an easy conquest, another world to add to the Kroth's growing empire. Earth had no shields, no significant defense forces. Its population, primitive and divided, seemed like an easy target, but the invasion had not gone as planned. The humans had surprised him at every turn, using tactics that defied all expectations. They fought like their very survival depended on it, because it did. Now, as the war raged on, Karish could feel something in the air. The Kroth were not invincible here. This was not going to be the easy victory they had expected. The first wave of the invasion had been a brutal assault. Cities fell in seconds as Kroth forces unleashed their superior firepower, reducing buildings to rubble. But then, unexpectedly, the humans began to fight back. At first, it was small, isolated attacks, militias emerging from hidden bunkers, sabotaging supply lines, using guerrilla tactics to strike fear into the invaders. The Kroth dismissed it as a minor nuisance, but the attacks grew in intensity and coordination. Humans who had no training in warfare fought as if they had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. They adapted, learned, and struck again and again, targeting weak points in the Kroth invasion. Each victory they gained fueled their will to resist. The Kroth were not dealing with a broken species. They were facing an unyielding will to survive. By the time the second wave of Kroth forces touched down on Earth, it became clear that the humans were not just reacting. They were organizing. Entire cities had been turned into fortresses, and the resistance had begun to take shape. Human soldiers, previously uncoordinated, had begun to communicate with deadly precision. They were using weapons they shouldn't have been able to make, advanced technology scavenged from the wreckage of Kroth ships. They were using the very tools of their invaders against them. And with each passing day, they were becoming more effective. The Kroth had underestimated the human capacity to adapt and learn. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to protect everything they held dear. It was in the heart of one of Earth's largest cities where the true turning point occurred. The city had been a symbol of human strength, vast, sprawling, and filled with millions of people. The Kroth thought it would fall easily. But as their forces descended upon it, they were met with an unexpected defense. The streets were empty, eerily quiet, but the silence felt more like a trap. Kroth soldiers advanced cautiously, their weapons drawn, scanning the buildings around them. Suddenly, explosions erupted from beneath the streets, sending shockwaves through the city. Vehicles, armored with thick Kroth plating, were blasted into the air. The resistance had planted explosives deep underground, setting traps that tore through the invaders' ranks. As the dust settled, Karish's forces pushed forward. But the humans were ready. They had anticipated the Kroth's every move. Soldiers emerged from hidden bunkers, their weapons trained on the invaders, cutting down Kroth warriors with calculated precision. But it wasn't just the soldiers. Civilians who had been hiding in the shadows now stood their ground, armed with whatever they could find: rifles, homemade grenades, and even sharp tools. They fought alongside the military. It wasn't just an organized resistance. It was the entire population fighting for their homes, their families, their future. The Kroth had never seen anything like it. No other species had fought back like this. No one had the resolve to turn their cities into battlegrounds and fight until the last breath. But the humans did, and with each passing hour, the Kroth began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for unity and resilience. The fear that had once been confined to the edges of the Kroth camp began to spread throughout their ranks. Every day that passed, more Kroth soldiers went missing. They would vanish without a trace, taken by the humans in ambushes or snatched from their camps in the dead of night. Even Karish's elite forces were being decimated. Desperation began to take hold among the invaders. Karish, once confident in his ability to crush this rebellion, now found himself on the defensive. The humans were adapting faster than he could react. They were using the terrain to their advantage, hiding in the forests, in the mountains, in the very cities the Kroth had thought were under their control. The more the Kroth pushed, the stronger the resistance became. The invaders had thought they would break the human spirit by destroying their cities. Instead, they had unwittingly sparked a fire that could not be extinguished. The real turning point came when a group of human engineers, working from underground bunkers, managed to hack into the Kroth's communication network. For the first time, Karish and his officers found themselves unable to coordinate their forces. Messages were scrambled, orders were lost, and information about enemy movements was compromised. The humans had cracked the system, and in doing so, had created chaos among the Kroth. The war had turned in their favor, and now every move the Kroth made was being anticipated. Karish knew something had to change. They had to adapt. The invaders had the power to destroy Earth from the skies. But if they did, they would be destroying everything they had come to conquer. And the humans would win, not through force, but through the sheer will to survive. The Kroth had not understood what they were up against. They thought they were battling a primitive species. They were wrong. They were battling something far more dangerous, an enemy with no intention of surrendering, no intention of retreating. They were fighting a species that would rise, no matter how many times it was knocked down, a species that would never give up. The turning point had come not with a single victory, but with the realization that the humans were not just fighting for their homes. They were fighting for something much bigger, something that would change the galaxy forever. They were fighting for their future, and as the Kroth began to retreat from Earth's atmosphere, Karish knew he had been wrong. This war, which he had expected to end in a matter of days, was only the beginning. The humans had not just survived, they had proven that they were unstoppable. And now, the galaxy would know the truth about Earth. The Kroth warships hovered above Earth's atmosphere, their dark shadows stretching over the planet like a gathering storm. General Karish, his expression taut with frustration and fear, stood at the command center of his flagship, watching the chaos unfold on the holographic display before him. The battle was lost. The humans had turned their world into an unyielding fortress, and despite all their technological superiority, the Kroth were being forced to retreat. It had started as an easy conquest, an invasion that should have been over within days. Now, as the invaders scrambled to recover their remaining forces, Karish could feel the bitter sting of defeat. But it wasn't just the loss that gnawed at him. It was the undeniable truth that the Kroth had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated Earth. The ground forces that had been sent to secure key cities were either missing or wiped out. The Kroth had thought they would quickly crush any resistance. What they hadn't accounted for was the sheer will of the human spirit. Every time, they thought they had the upper hand. Every time they thought they could push forward, the humans had struck back with relentless force. The cities were no longer places of terror and submission. They were battlegrounds where the humans fought with a strength that made even the bravest of Kroth warriors hesitate. What started as small, sporadic attacks had now become coordinated, professional-level operations. The human resistance had become an unstoppable tide. As Karish's fleet began to retreat into space, the desperation of his forces was palpable. They had faced countless battles across the galaxy, but this one had been different. The humans had never given up, never slowed down, never broken. Each human victory, whether it was the destruction of a Kroth war machine or the capture of a Kroth officer, seemed to energize the people. It became clear that the humans were not just fighting to protect their cities. They were fighting for their very existence, and they would stop at nothing to ensure they survived. Karish's fleet, which had once been a symbol of overwhelming strength, was now a scattering of wounded ships, each retreating in different directions to avoid further destruction. The Kroth were leaving Earth behind, but the damage to their pride was irreversible. On the ground, as the final Kroth forces were pushed back, General Karish received an unexpected transmission. The frequency was encrypted, the signal barely making it through the interference created by the chaos of the battle. The voice that came through was calm, almost eerily so. "General Karish," the voice said. It was unmistakably human, and yet it carried an authority that sent a chill down his spine. "You have made a grave mistake. You thought you could invade Earth and enslave its people, but you have failed. The galaxy will hear of this defeat, and the next time you think of invading, remember, humanity is not so easily conquered." Karish's jaw clenched. Who was this? A leader of the human resistance, or perhaps someone even higher up in their government? He didn't know, but the words carried a weight that could not be ignored. The transmission continued, sending a warning that made his blood run cold. "We have fought to protect our homes, our families, and our future. But we are not alone. There are many more worlds out there, and we are not the only ones who will rise to protect them. The galaxy is full of species that have made the same mistake you did. They have underestimated us, and they will suffer the same fate. Consider this a warning, Karish. Next time, we will be ready, and we will not stop until the last of you has fled." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Karish standing there in stunned silence. The message echoed in his mind, its chilling tone replaying over and over. He had heard rumors, stories, whispers about humanity's resilience, but now he understood. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something far bigger than themselves. Earth was just the beginning, and their victory would not be forgotten. This wasn't the end of the conflict. It was merely the beginning of a long, relentless war that the Kroth could never have predicted. The retreat was now inevitable. The Kroth fleet, battered and broken, turned away from Earth, heading back to the vastness of space. But Karish's mind was consumed with the warning that had been delivered so calmly, so decisively. The humans were not afraid. They had fought back with everything they had, and now they had sent a clear message to the Kroth. Their days of conquest were numbered. Karish realized that the human resolve was not something that could be easily crushed. They were not a species that would bend under pressure, nor would they ever allow themselves to be dominated. As the warships slowly ascended through the Earth's atmosphere, Karish knew they were leaving more than just the planet behind. They were leaving behind a humiliation that would be talked about for generations. The Kroth had been routed by a species they had dismissed as weak, unworthy of their attention, and as their ships disappeared into the stars, Karish couldn't shake the feeling that Earth had just become something far more dangerous, a symbol of resistance for the rest of the galaxy. The galaxy would not forget the lessons learned here. The Kroth had been bested by humanity, and that more than anything would haunt him for the rest of his life. In the days that followed, the humans celebrated their victory, but their leaders were already thinking ahead. They had won, but the war was not over. Their message had been heard, and they would prepare for what was to come. They would not allow this defeat to define them. Instead, it would fuel their resolve. The galaxy was full of threats, and they would be ready for them. They knew now that their survival depended not just on their military strength, but on their unity, their determination, and their refusal to ever give up. And for the Kroth, that was the most terrifying realization of all.